come on. This is an automotive piece of art.
Now, for those of you who love these because they've got a Ferrari engine, just because it's Italian and comes from the same parent company, that doesn't actually make it a Ferrari. That's like saying because I'm a man and I'm Australian that I'm like Chris Hemsworth.
Okay, yes, you could buy one of these at absolute bargain prices these days. And yes, it looks beautiful and it sounds amazing and all that sort of stuff, but as a used Maserati, surely that means it's just a nightmare of reliability issues. Buying one would be a crazy idea, right? Or is it? Because is a used Maserati GranTurismo possibly one of the best kept secrets in all of the world of automotive? Tell you what, how about we find out? And look, obviously we're going to be going over all of the details of these things in a moment, but let's start with what goes wrong with them, kicking off with the beautiful exterior. Okay, there's a statement that you might want to get used to in this video. It is, owners have reported a host of electrical issues, starting with the parking sensors. These can fail, but the problem is if one goes, it can take out the whole lot. Next up, owners have reported that the rain sensing wipers can just fail. However, this might just be an easy fix, just replace the sensor. Then there are sporadic gremlins like lighting issues, power window issues, power mirror issues, but we need to make it clear, these are not what we would call common at all, but they can occasionally happen. However, in saying that, we have read a few reports where owners have come out to their garage to drive the car on a Sunday morning and the indicators are just flashing and the windscreen wipers are going. Now these weird electronic issues, it could be everything from just a wire being loose somewhere, maybe the alternator's on its way out, or maybe it's just a voltage regulator issue. But what many owners find the issue is just the battery. If it's not at its best, it can create a whole host of dramas. Fitting a brand new battery, suddenly all the issues tend to vanish. Okay, next up, make sure that any of the drainage channels have been cleared and make sure they actually haven't been dislodged in any way, because at the rear of the car, if they have been, the boot can fill up with water. Speaking of water leaks, if you are tempted by the drop top version of this, the Grand Cabrio, just make sure that thing isn't leaking because there are plenty of reports that the soft top can leak. Also, make sure that the whole thing works properly because if it gets out of alignment or if there are any issues with the opening and closing mechanism, it's a Maserati. Parts and repairs are gonna be bloody expensive. Speaking of things not being cheap, you gotta remember, this thing weighs nearly 1,900 kilos. So if you drive it in the way it was intended, the consumables, things like tires and brakes and suspension components, yeah, this thing can have an appetite for them. And the thing is, if you want your big, fast Italian to perform at its best, you're gonna have to fit premium tires and at least OEM components for the brakes and suspension, if not really high quality aftermarket parts. And guess what? All of that stuff, expensive. But here's the hot tip on parts. Work out what stuff is shared with Ferrari because amazingly, quite often the Ferrari parts are cheaper than the Maserati parts. For example, a 488 alternator is exactly the same one in this, but the Ferrari alternator can sometimes be over $1,000 cheaper than the Maserati part. It's the same part. Okay, next up, there are a whole host of optional carbon fiber parts you can get, like door handle coverings, bits of aero, stuff like that. The problem here is, and this is especially in hot climates, the clear coat on the carbon can wear away and the carbon can sort of fade. Even the adhesive can leave the chat, so the actual carbon parts just start peeling off. Even with some of the chrome parts, like the badging, these little vent surrounds, things like that, yeah, in hot climates, they can just start coming away. Now, owners have reported that the more recent the model of the car, the less likely the car is to have these issues. These were in production for 12 years. That's an eternity in the world of car manufacturing. And look, yeah, they did update it time and time again, most notably in 2013 and 2017. But fun fact, these things had the fastest development process of any production car, going from design to manufacturing in just 9 months. But the problem with this is that is just simply not enough time for a manufacturer to sort out all of the issues with the car. It seems like the early owners of these, they became at worst the guinea pigs and at best the test pilots working out what went wrong with it rather than the factory doing it. Now, look, Maserati's excuse for this might have been the fact that many of the components in this car are shared within the Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Maserati family, so therefore a lot of the R&D work on the actual components was already done. Actually, just on the sharing of components, both the initial 4.2 litre V8 and the 4.7 litre V8 from 2008, short of the crankshaft and a few other elements, are incredibly closely related to the engines that you're going to find in the Ferrari F430 and the California. And just like the Ferrari models, the output can vary depending on what model it's powering. Also, depending on which of the 10 models you're considering, power is sent to the rear wheels via either a 6-speed ZF Auto or the 6-speed Graziano MC shift, which is basically an automated manual, but I tell you what, these things have a shocking reputation for reliability, but we'll uncover all that when we get into the mechanical what goes wrong with it. But it's important to understand, while the issues we are talking about might seem like massive doom and gloom and you shouldn't go near the car, thousands and thousands of owners out there have had completely fault-free ownership experiences. The owners groups are full of amazing stories of cars that have run faultlessly forever. Also, a massive thank you to all of the Maserati GranTurismo owners groups for helping us with this video. Also, all the Maserati techs we spoke to, you guys are legends. Thank you so much. We couldn't make this video without you. Especially Gorman Michael Anthony from the US. Mate, you're a legend. Thank you for sending me so much information on these cars. You're a legend. Now, one of the first areas that these things really start to flirt with you is in what they now cost. In saying that, if you bought one of these brand spanking new, you might want to skip ahead a few seconds because this is really going to hurt. If you're buying one used, you're going to love this. Brand new here in Australia, a 2019 MC was retailing at around about $350,000. Right now, that same car can be had for well under $200,000. That's a $150,000 loss in value in just 5 years. That's about 30 grand a year. Even on the really early examples, you can pick some of these up for under $50,000. Imagine paying $350,000 for a car and then 15 years later, it's dropped $250,000 in value. That's terrifying. Although in saying that, if you bought one in 2008, that means you've had 15 years just to sit back and look at it. Because, come on, this is an automotive piece of art. It is, I don't know if it translates in pictures so well, but in the flesh or in the metal, it is stunning. It's like this perfect blend between aggressive and athletic, but at the same time, classy and understated and just so sophisticated. And you know when a manufacturer got the design right from the start, because even though they updated this car quite a few times, the overall design really didn't change at all. Okay, the front intakes changed a little bit, but yeah, overall, it looks the same as it did right through the production process. That's, for me, kind of perfect car design. In fact, I'll go as far as saying I prefer the looks of this compared to the brand new one. I love these more horizontal, aggressive headlights. With the new one, they're a little bit longer, more sort of vertical, and it just looks a bit geeky from the front. It doesn't look well proportioned. This, look at it. However, there is an issue with the exterior of this generation. Too many out there have just been ruined with shitty, enormous rims and dropped on the ground. Look, if you're gonna tinker with it, do us a favor and keep it classy. Like, it's a beautiful car standard, just enhance it, don't ruin it. An interesting tidbit with the exterior, it's like Maserati had a sneaking suspicion that the car might have some electronic gremlins, because the door handle actually has two handles. There's one that has the electronic open and another one that has the mechanical open. Interesting. Now, while the car deserves to be enhanced in a tasteful manner, it also deserves to have a better infotainment system, because especially on the earlier examples, this thing is shit. Owners have reported everything from Bluetooth and just phone connection issues, slow operation to the entire system just shutting down or resetting, the screens freezing or turning blue or black. You think of a problem that an infotainment system can have, and chances are there's a Maserati out there that has suffered from it. Even as far as just using it, I feel like this was out at a time in history where technology, it wasn't even sure what it was supposed to provide, but all it does provide is just immense frustration. It's not even technically a touch screen. You've got to use the buttons to control everything. Now, I'm normally a fan of using buttons instead of a touch screen, because I think buttons are just more tactile, therefore they're safer. But it doesn't really make any sense with what you're doing. You've really got to know how to use it. It's just not intuitive at all. Now, the good news here is that from 2018, Maserati completely changed the infotainment system, and that means from that date on, you also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But even the issue with these upgraded systems is that they're not one of the better systems in the automotive world. It's, again, not intuitive to use, and even owners of the new systems, they're starting to complain about some issues with them as well. Also, a quick warning, if you are going to upgrade the infotainment system, make sure you go and see an expert, because plenty of owners have had problems where they've installed an aftermarket head unit, but then it's gone on to create a whole host of other electrical issues. This is the problem with having a sort of CAN bus system of wiring. The problems can be so bad, some cars have actually caught on fire due to an aftermarket infotainment system being installed incorrectly. If you're getting an infotainment system fitted, just get a professional to do it. Actually, that leads us to the statement that you should be getting used to by now. Owners have reported a whole host of electrical issues. We're talking things like the occasional button here and there not working, to the seat heating just turning on by itself, to the dashboard warning lights all lighting up like a Christmas tree. Even really weird stuff like the radio turning itself on at full volume, but playing like a dial-up fax machine kind of sound. Now these issues, they could be similar to the exterior electrical issues where it's a voltage issue or a battery or an alternator problem, but it might also be a case that your car is possessed by demons and evil spirits. Basically, if your local Maserati specialist or auto electrician can't sort the electrical issues in the car out, try to find a priest or some sort of a religious leader that can exorcise the car, because apparently that can help. Also, there's a bit of a common issue of the airbag warning light coming on. Now, hopefully that just means the car needs a reflash to the software. That'll hopefully sort it out, because if it's a more insidious electronic issue, it can cost all of the thousands of dollars to fix. And then there are all of the annoying issues that almost proved Maserati rushed the design and development process of this car. Like the fact that many of the sun visors will refuse to actually stay up if the car's more than 3 years old. All of the buttons can get really sticky and gross. And then the control panel for the seats, that can break if you sit in the seat too enthusiastically, and that obviously impacts the level of seat adjustment. Now, there are fixes for many of these issues. Get on the owners groups, there's plenty of great tutorials there. Also, a few owners mentioned that while the leather is beautiful and soft and supple, it's not the most resilient. Now look, obviously this car was never intended to be some workhorse of a family car, but if the leather hasn't been cared for, or if it's kept outside for too long, expect some cracking and wear and tear. Even the Alcantara, it can start to gather and just feel gross and look terrible. Actually, just on the subject of Alcantara, both in the hard top and the soft top, the inner layer of Alcantara, that can start to come loose. It shouldn't cost too much to fix, but if you do go to Maserati to have it done, it's going to cost a bloody fortune. And another issue that I personally have with the interior is just in the way it looks. Don't get me wrong, it's not an ugly interior at all, but even in 2010 when this car was new, I feel like it felt 10 years old then, let alone now. Just like with the exterior is so incredible to look at. I just wish the interior had the same effect, and it doesn't. Like, it wraps around you nice enough, but I feel like it needs just a little bit more flair. It doesn't feel quite special enough. Look, I know a lot of the aging might come down to how old school this infotainment system is, but even in the more recent examples with the big touchscreen, I still don't feel it looks as special as it should. Also, I was expecting a higher quality of fit and finish. Obviously, the higher up the food chain you go and the more recent the car, the better the fit and finish and the materials should be, but like, there's just some weird noises and the plastics don't feel, again, it doesn't feel as premium as you'd possibly expect. But positives, the seating position is absolutely beautiful. You feel so part of the car. It's not as overtly sporty as say a Ferrari, but it's just the perfect, it's like the exterior and the overall design and vibe of the car. It's this perfect balance between being so comfortable for a long trip, but then sporty and aggressive when you want it to be. Also, these paddles, they feel so good to use. I don't know why more manufacturers don't go with something a bit more tactile like this. Like Volkswagen Group stuff, it's just this shitty little plastic button you hit. Basically, this actually feels engaging. Also, another highlight, and this definitely won't translate on camera, is the smell in here. I think that's why I'm getting a bit confused with the interior, because it smells so expensive, but then when you touch things and look at it, it just doesn't. The looks and the feel don't match the quality of smell. Look, as far as using the interior, obviously the infotainment system is completely shit, but even the climate control, it's like Maserati went, okay, let's take the thing that you're going to use all the time that should be simple and make it as convoluted and as confusing as possible. And aside from that, look, obviously you're going to get the stuff you'd sort of expect, but even if the original owner went crazy and ticked all of the option boxes, it's still going to miss out on some stuff that you really would expect in a car in this category. We're talking no radar guided cruise control, a distinct lack of USB ports, no wireless phone charging. If you're after tech and features, maybe a GranTurismo is not the car for you. You guessed it, it's time for another Wipertech challenge. Today's victim, applesauce. Now, before we see how these wipe, remember Wipertech wiper blades are super easy to order online. They're an absolute breeze to fit. And if you order them via the link, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Let's see how they go. Go for it. Ugh. So if these things can handle that, surely they're going to handle anything that you can throw at them. Get yourself a set today. Also, as a thank you present for lending us his car, Alan is going to be going home with a free set. Now, if you'd like a free set, all you have to do is own a car that you think would make for a cool ReDriven video, live in Sydney or Newcastle or somewhere close, and if we feature your car, you're going to get a free set. Now, as far as using this interior from a practicality standpoint, not too bad. You've got actually a tiny glove box there. You've got 2 cup holders here that, yes, will hold small pretentious coffees like you'd expect in an Italian car, the ones I drink, like a macchiato. You've got a pretty decent sized little bin here with, again, cup holder cutouts, and also you can probably store your phone in there as well. There's a spot here, which I don't think that'll fit a phone. No, that's not going to hold a phone, no chance. There's also a spot for a cigarette lighter and an ashtray here. But the ashtray is really only big enough for, I reckon, maybe 1 cigarette, and that's one too many in your life anyway. Rubbish door bins, they're really only good for things that have 2 dimensions, no storage there, nothing under the seats, nowhere for sunglasses there. Yeah, not great practicality up front. Okay, now in the back seat, I'm exactly 36 centimeters taller than Maserati GranTurismo owner and music icon Kylie Minogue. Between you and I as well, I bloody love Kylie Minogue. She's amazing. Anyway, in the back seat, this, considering what this car is, this is actually quite comfortable. Okay, knees are squashed up a little bit, but there is an okay amount of footroom. The seats themselves are super comfy. With the armrest down, this is actually quite a nice place to be. Even as far as features and practicality go, you've got 2 cup holders. Again, they'll hold small pretentious coffees. You've got a spot perfectly sized for your phone here, although like the front, the plastic's getting a bit sticky and gross. You've got your own air vents, speakers. There's an storage cubby bins here, but there's no chance you can get to them if you've actually got a leg. Also, the most aggressive coat hanger hook in all of the world of automotive. Jesus. It's actually, again, I'm really surprised at how nice it is back here. Even as far as headroom goes, like, remember, I'm pretty tall, but I've got a good amount of headroom. The windows are quite small, so that should make you feel claustrophobic, but because the actual colours in here are quite light, it doesn't, although some of this trim is coming away a little bit. That's not good. Even as far as actually getting in and out, that is so easy. People online complained about how hard it is to access the back. I disagree. That's a breeze. Now, as far as practicality in the boot goes, the only surprise here is that it's maybe not as large as you'd think, but at least the opening aperture is quite large. That's good. And then in terms of safety, unfortunately, it's a bit like the features inside. It's maybe lacking some stuff that you'd expect. No forward collision warnings, no blind spot monitoring, no automatic braking, no lane assist. And all of this would be maybe excusable if it was some hardcore track driving weapon, but it's not. It's supposed to be a GT car, so it's supposed to cover large kilometers, so it really should have some better safety features. Now, this brings us to the common complaints and issues with the driving experience, and the first thing you need to be on the lookout for is, how does the suspension feel? Now, at this age, you can expect some wear and tear from the bushes and things like struts. The problem is many sellers would rather just sell the car rather than spend the money to fix these things. So when you're test driving one, just feel for any kind of shimmering or clunking or listen out for any strange sounds. The same goes for the stupid automated manual transmissions. Does it work in the first place? And if it does it shift smoothly and hold gear properly? Another complaint that owners have had, and I completely agree, judging the parameters of the car can be a challenge. And when you consider the repair costs, if you happen to bump into anything, when you're dealing with traffic or trying to just park the thing, it just becomes more stressful than it really should be. But the big issue you might come across when driving one of these, and it's even worse if you've got passengers on board, is if you rev it from low in the rev range out, you become aroused, and that can just be embarrassing. See, if you do this, and it's not just the sound, there's this throbbing vibration that comes up through the seat of your pants and kind of engulfs your groin, and honestly, it's verging on being a sexual experience. And the tempting thing with all of this is that you can experience that all of the time, like pull out of a driveway, through a roundabout, out of a 40-kilometer-an-hour corner, and you can get that experience. Because I feel like rather than Maserati just focusing on sheer performance and acceleration times, they've just prioritized the overall driving experience, and I think the car in your life is all the better for it. The sign, hang on, oh my God. The sign of a truly great performance car is one that you can explore to its best at really any speed, And this thing absolutely nails that. But this raises such a massive issue with this car, because when you research it and you'll uncover endless stories of reliability issues and build quality problems, and you just convince yourself, oh, what a terrible car. And then you go and see it and smell it and hear it and especially drive it, and all logic and common sense just goes flying out the window, and you're convincing yourself that your life is just going to be a better thing with a Maserati GranTurismo in it. This is until you have a pang of reality and start thinking about what happens if there were any serious mechanical issues. Well, to elaborate on this, how about we cut to somebody that's actually qualified to talk about it? It's our resident mechanic, Jim.
Now, I know I ragged on these earlier for not being a Ferrari engine, but yeah, look, you can have that. They are similar. These have a cross plane crank instead of a flat plane crank, a different inlet as well, and they sound totally different. They do have more torque than the Ferrari engine though, so that's a good thing. But just like a Ferrari engine, they do leak oil from the valve covers and the timing cover too. Some of the things you might be fixing are oil leaks from the timing cover and from the valve covers. Those valve covers are incredibly difficult to get off because they're buried under everything, and it's a really common problem. Electrically speaking, in the engine bay, the alternator is somewhat problematic, and there are a couple of coolant hoses, one to the oil cooler under the manifold and one at the back of the engine. Now, some people say that one at the back of the engine is you have to drop the engine to get at it. That is not the case. You just have to take the manifold off and you can reach it right back down there. You also have to take the manifold off to get out the alternator. So if you're going to take the manifold off, you might as well just do the whole thing while you're in there. Also with the cooling system expansion tank, it splits. Not terribly difficult to fix, but a fairly common problem. One of the bigger issues on the earlier versions of these engines is the camshaft drive gears, or the variators as Maserati like to call them. The problem with these is basically oil supply. On startup, especially cold, you'll hear a terrible rattling sound. Now there is a modification you can do to this. They just modify one of the cam caps and they just put a check valve in there like the later models, and that often fixes the problem. However, if it's been rattling for some time, it's likely that you can do that and it still won't fix the issue, and you'll have to put cam gears in it or variators in it. That is very expensive and pretty common problem too. The AC system, yeah, the compressor on these is prone to failure too. The automatic transmissions in these, that is a ZF unit, that's a 6 HP. Now, much like its newer version, the 8 HP that's in just about every rear-wheel drive performance car made now, they are pretty reliable. They can have some overheating issues and they can have some clutch complications, but overall, pretty reliable. But servicing is key. If you're leaning on it at all, I would recommend servicing every 50,000 Ks. Now the MC shift, that's the automated manual, actually pretty reliable. A lot of people complain about it, it's slow and it's not really the gearbox to have, but overall they're okay. There are a few clutch actuation complications, but overall, despite the complaints, they're pretty reliable. The wheel bearings on these, they do wear out prematurely, as do the front steering and suspension components. The lower control arm suspension bushes, they do wear out very quickly. And brakes too. Big heavy car, and if you're pushing it, you're gonna go through brakes. Pretty expensive too. Now, the Skyhook suspension, that's Maserati's version of active dampeners. Overall, not considered to be unreliable, but plenty of issues here and there and everywhere. Owners experiencing oil leaks from the struts, valve body issues and electrical gremlins, height adjusters, they can all fail occasionally. Also, electrically in that system, logs a whole bunch of fault codes, and some owners experiencing you can just clear the fault codes and it fixes itself and never comes back. However, other owners have experienced the complete opposite and have had to replace just about every part in the whole system. And guess what? That's going to cost all of the thousands of dollars. Now, this is part of the reason why these depreciate so much. They're not unreliable per se, but plenty does go wrong, and the cost of parts is astronomical. But hey, at least it's a Ferrari engine, right?
But one of the big issues that the GranTurismo has are all of the other cars that you can buy for around about the same budget that tick many of the same boxes. When talking a powerful engine, two-door coupe or convertible with sort of 4 seats, at the lower end of the pricing spectrum, you could land yourself in a BMW M3 or M4, a Ford Mustang, or even an earlier generation AMG C63. Climb the pricing ladder in the Audi RS5, the Chevrolet Camaro, and the HSV Coupe enter the chat. Although maybe the underdog pick in this pricing category surely has to be the Lexus RCF. Top $100,000, and great examples of the AMG C63S become an option. Top 150 grand, and you could be behind the wheel of a a Bentley Continental instead. But no matter which of these cars you're looking at, or really any car, if you're in the market for car finance, do yourself a favour and hit that Driver link down there. Driver will find you the very best car finance package from loads of different lenders. Applying online is super easy, completely free, and the entire process is going to have no impact on your credit score. But after all of this video, we're guessing that you're thinking we're going to recommend against buying a Maserati GranTurismo. You know what? Yeah, you're wrong. Realistically, and ignoring any value that the brand image bullshit brings to it, a GranTurismo at under $100,000 is about what the car is worth. Maserati should never have charged what they did for this thing, but thanks to people falling for the romance that the brand brings with it, people happily paid what was asked. But their loss could be your gain. Just please make sure you do all the critical pre-purchase inspection stuff. Be aware of the commitment that you're getting yourself into, and make sure you've got $20,000 to $30,000 set aside just in case something were to actually go wrong with it. But an $80,000 GranTurismo with a $20,000 rainy day fund, my God, that could be an epically amazing car. But whatever you do, don't spend more than $150,000 on one, okay? Like, yes, it's beautiful in every possible way, but even when brand spanking new, it was never worth 150 grand, let alone now that they're all used. Or instead, you could buy one of the, let's say, more predictable, but also arguably more recommended everyday performance cars. This. But if you weren't to buy this or this, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. And the first one we need to cover is, how does it...
Occasionally the alternator.
Is that like an alternator?
Yeah, it's a new thing, you wouldn't have heard of it.
GranTurismo, potentially one of the best kept secrets.